only fair, Steve, if they're going to be doing a, like a demonstration of somebody getting spanked, that should go to me. I have,
yeah.
I mean, it's only
fair.
fair.
We should spank you for this. Yeah, let's do it.
So David, when we go live, but when we go live, David, I just want it to be made clear that I'm the one that gets the spankings.
I'm not going to be the one getting spanking. He's going to be a spank. Yeah, so I'm going to be spanking him.
Huh?
Right? What?
We're live.
Okay.
David, you have one job.
Hey, welcome to NonSequitur. No spanking will be taking place.
Unfortunately.
Yes,
I was looking forward to that. Yes. Welcome to NonSequitur. I'm Kyle Curtis, joined always by Steve McRae. We've got Dave producing tonight, and a very different, very unique, very divisive topic tonight on this Friday evening. Which, by the way, sorry we're late. I'm going to be on a stream that Mr. Atheist will be airing on Sunday with Logic and it's Eric, right? Was their last name Murphy? I'm not sure I got that right. I think he was on there with you. My mind scrambled from transitioning.
Oh, there's Eric.
But
Eric and His name's Eric. From Talk Heathens, or the Heathen Hour podcast.
He's hilarious.
He's right. Yeah, he's awesome. Yeah, nice guy.
Hilarious. But yeah, Eric, if you're watching this, please don't take offense. My mind is just on 9,000 different places. I forget Steve's name half the time. Yeah,
he's a little disappointed that he's not
getting
spanked, I guess.
That threw my night off. Yeah. But so check that out Sunday. Also, following the stream tonight, I'm gonna let Steve tell you about what he's got going on real quick, and then we'll go through what we got coming up, and then we'll get to the spankings.
By the way, it's Eric Murphy. Really nice guy. I really enjoyed it. I was on the Mr. Atheist's Sunday Mass with him, and I really had fun. Tonight, I will be on Goddess Iowa's channel. We'll be having a discussion on a video made by God is Not Good, dealing with agnosticism and atheism, and that'll be at 10 o'clock Central or 8 o'clock Pacific. So, unfortunately, we won't have a 2-hour program here today, but that's going to be in about an hour and a half or something like that. So, looking forward to that.
Okay, and let's go through what we've got coming up for you guys. Beginning with tomorrow at 8 o'clock Eastern. It's 8 p.m. Eastern. We've got the effed up Flat Earth weekend. Is it coming up? Let's see it coming up. Dave, are you putting these up? No, you lost Dave.
Are you there? He's okay. Cool. He's spanking somebody or something. Okay, whatever.
Okay.
Could have done that before the show.
I just didn't want to get too far ahead of myself. But tomorrow at 8 o'clock we have Greater Sapien going to be joining us. We're going to be talking about the Kickstarter program that he has coming up, where he's going to, in a sense, circumvent the globe, disproving the flat Earth model in itself. Somehow they'll still claim that he's a shill and that that it doesn't work like that. But so that will be tomorrow at 8. And then on Sunday we have two guys that a couple days ago went through our one of our flat Earth videos and kind of broke it down and made a lot of comments, and I think we're going to tackle some of those and then go into what the true shape of the Earth is, that is beyond the imaginary curve, and that will be with Dale and Gav. Also joining us will be Reds Redrick and Jim Panda, so do not miss that. That's going to be epic, and it's Sunday at 4. That's 4 p.m. Eastern on Sunday. And then on Monday, we will have our rescheduled Jehovah's Witness debate between Telltale Atheist, Lloyd Evans, and an active Jehovah's Witness. That will be a reschedule from this past week. Don't miss that. That's going to be good as well. And then on the, let me get my days right. That Tuesday, we have. I was contacted by an author. You can see there on your screen, Charles Kowalski. He wrote a very interesting book, and that is, what if terrorism worldwide was committed in the name of atheism? So that's what this book kind of goes through. It's really interesting. He's going to be with us Tuesday to go through that. That will be at 8 o'clock. That's 8 p.m. Eastern. And then on Friday, very special interview with a very edgy, does not hold back on what is on his on what's on his mind, and that is Nightmare Fuel. It's going to be a really good interview. I've got a couple things, a couple controversial issues that we're going to tackle and get his unfiltered thoughts on. So join us for that on Friday at 8 o'clock. And I don't have a thumb for this one, but I'm going to go ahead and tell you guys, on Thursday, we're going to be doing a debate between Mr. Atheist and Jay Dyer. And Jay Dyer wrote a book about secret symbols being hidden in Hollywood movies. And we're going to kind of go through the symbolism, see if there's anything to it. And Mr. Atheist will be joining us for that. So big week, a lot of cool stuff coming up, and even more exciting things coming now with spankings. And the question tonight is, should you use spankings as part of a punishment for children? Unfortunately, we're not going to get into the spicy side of it. The question is not, should spankings be used as a form of, what's the word for that, Steve? What's a good safe word for that?
I don't know. When it comes to children, I don't know what you're talking about.
Hanky. Yeah.
That went dark.
I'm gonna turn it over to Steve now, who will introduce our guest tonight, and then we will get started.
All right. Well, tonight we've got Imbalance. He has been a YouTuber for quite some time. He's on Pit Monk's channel quite often. He does a lot of atheist activism type things on his channel. He's going to be advocating for the position that it is acceptable to spank your children. And then on the
actually,
con
that's
side,
the opposite of what I'm going to be advocating.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're right. You're on the con side. Yes, I'm sorry. I've already screwed up your position. Your position is whatever I tell you your position is. That's how it works on here.
And you're missing an in. Well, I mean, you have to tell me my position so that we can do the demonstration.
Look, that's what we do here. We work hard to make sure we strive hard to make sure we do not look professional here. Okay, we cannot be giving off this image that we know what we're doing.
I had it down at the beginning, though. Okay, so yeah, you're going to be arguing that it is not acceptable to spank your children, and then on the pro side, and I'm going to let you pronounce how you pronounce your name, because I've already
pronounce it Agnatheist.
Agnatheist. Okay, he pronounces it Agnatheist, and the Agnatheist is going to be arguing that it is acceptable to spank your children. So there you go. Which one would you like you to start? This is kind of like debate roulette. It's not going to be a very long discussion. I don't think it's not an intricately detailed discussion. So feel free to keep it kind of superficial and lighthearted. But
let them
like start us off.
Yeah, let them introduce their. Okay. We'll start with him. Introduce yourself.
Yeah, start off
channel,
with introduce yourself and.
Yeah.
I'm just going to go by my channel name, Analysis, and what I do is I destroy Christian music from an atheist perspective because it's fun to fuck with the emotional connections people have with their religion. I have yet to see atheist YouTubers really doggedly go after worship, and I fucking hate it. So I made a channel about it. But anyways, my position as a former foster child, I was brought up in a system where spanking wasn't allowed, and a lot of the kids turned out pretty okay given their circumstances. And I learned some interesting philosophies about how to raise children, although I don't have any vested interest in it, seeing as how I will not be having children, nor do I care to. I still have an opinion on it. I said it one time too.
Yeah. We all. I think most people start off. You don't want kids, but it kind of ends up being the case many times.
Oh, you have no idea how far I am in my position.
Oh wait, I'm sorry. You have to have sex to have kids. You're right. You're right. No worries.
Can you give us an
example
of? Can you give us an example of how you destroy the the hymns?
Oh God.
Is that putting you on the spot?
Well, I'm trying to think of my best
What's up?
moment where I did the song "Your
Watch
Grace
it,
Is
chat.
Enough."
What was the
Oh,
song
are you-
If
name?
you feel like it's putting you on the spot, that's fine. I just thought it'd
Or
be
you want to pull up a clip? Go for it. Let me send you my best video.
Do you like Southern gospel music? At least
Well,
It
why-
depends.
why-
I have a
Go ahead.
wide
I love
taste.
Southern gospel.
There's a lot of good, like actually objectively good Christian music. You know what I mean? Like the tune is good, what have you. Like my favorite Christian song has got to be "Keep on the Fire in Line," which is like if you read it, you're like, oh my God, these fuckers are they're insane. They literally think they're the Lord's army.
You sound fun.
I
I think
I have to listen to it.
my favorite Christian song
That's my
is actually
best
not a
video
Christian
if you want a clip.
We'll
It's in
find
Twitter,
it, and
but I don't
maybe
know if
towards
you
the end
wanted it.
we'll play it towards the end.
It's
Okay,
not required. Trust me.
that's okay. All right. I can't. I'm not even gonna try to pronounce your name. Is it?
I know.
Magna-
I know why it's so hard for us.
Yeah, and explain what
Just
that is
think-
actually.
Just
'Cause
think
I'm
agnostic, atheist, and slam them together.
Oh.
Agnostius.
Steve, you
I
should.
like
Yeah,
this
so it
guy,
means agnostic,
Portmanteaus.
agnostic atheist, but Ignatius.
Okay, go ahead and introduce yourself, and then tell us a little bit about you, and we'll start with you. I guess you can go straight into your position since you're the one that's taking the pro side of the argument. So
Yeah,
whenever
since
you're
I
ready.
have the uphill battle. No, I go by Agnatheist. My Twitter handle is @RealAgnatheist. I am a civil engineer, land surveyor. Basically, I enjoy your guys' show a lot. I mean, you guys have a great show. But I also like listening to a lot of YouTube videos and people like analysis. And basically, my argument is going to be based on the concept of reasonable force. I think it's a term that is really well defined, at least legally, to be able to distinguish between either like abuse, what's abuse and assault on a child versus what's discipline on a child. And I think we get there through reasonable force.
Let me stop you real quick. You're
Sure.
Steve. Is his microphone sounding a little? It sounds like you're a little bit
No,
too close
it's
to your mic.
okay.
Are you getting that, Steve?
It's distorted a little bit.
Yeah, you
It's
sound a little bit.
A little bit. I would go back about 2 inches from your mic, maybe an inch or so.
Yeah, just back up a little bit from your mic. It just sounds like you're a little too close there.
Is this any better?
Oh yeah.
Sounds better so far.
Okay.
It's good enough. I mean, I can hear it. So
Yeah, go ahead. You sound better.
Yep. So, like I say, I think the standard we should be using is what I refer to as reasonable force, which, I mean, most police officers are familiar with that term, and it's what they are judged by for, say, if they were to arrest somebody, you know. If they go in front of a jury, the jury's going to say, okay, did you use reasonable force? And that's where I'm coming from with spanking children. I think if a child is acting in a manner where you could call the police and the police would come and get involved and like restrain that child or use force in some way to control that child, I think the parent should have the same right, if not more rights, to do the same thing to their own child, considering they are 100% responsible for that child.
May I step in,
something-
please? I want to do a direct response to that because that's a good point. I know where you're coming from. I'm not going to say that it's 100% flawed, but I want to add something. I used to be in a wilderness camp. The system was called Eckerd Youth Alternatives. It was like a juvenile detention facility, but like in the woods and shit. And one of the things they used if somebody was being unreasonable is the counselors were trained to restrain people. And it was never like, I'm going to hit you and then take you down, or I'm going to take you down and then use this as an opportunity to hit your captive ass. It was literally like, this is to stop you and calm you down. And then when you're done, I let go and we talk about it. that's a restraint and spanking are, you can't conflate the two, is what I'm getting at. There's a reasonable time for restraint, and that's when violence is occurring.
I'm using reasonable force in more than just restraint. Restraint is part of it, but you get to a certain point where, for instance, let's just take, I don't know if you guys saw that video of that like 20-year-old girl, whatever, that just got arrested on the beach. I don't know. Did you guys see that at all?
Uh-uh.
Basically, well, one of the police officers ended up tackling her, and she was resisting. And so, in order to stop her from resisting, he started hitting her to get her to stop. So that's kind of in the same realm of where I am approaching this from. Is
Well, let me ask you this.
spanking
Let me ask you this then.
is a tool.
Just to start off, so that we don't get too far deep, because I think it's important that we start off from all the same point. If the cops were to be called at a residence where the kids were acting up, the cops wouldn't tackle the kid and punch the kid. Like that wouldn't happen. So when you're trying to compare the two, like you should have the same amount of rights as the cops do.
I don't know what the kid's doing.
I don't. I mean,
like if the kid's assaulting somebody, they're going to take him down.
Yeah. They'll restrain him, but
and the cops often beat the shit out of people.
Focus on the actual spanking part of it and framing it in a way where it's not. Basically, what I'm saying is you're trying to compare two different things that aren't very comparable. Number one, you're talking about adults with adults, mostly with the cops. We want to focus on adults with kids, like when you're having behavioral issues and, them just acting crazy. Is it appropriate for an adult to impose that kind of will on them and to physically strike them as a form of punishment? Like the cops, when they come, they're going to try everything they can to avoid having to physically assault you. So, and that's not the case.
And I think a parent should do the same thing. They should try to avoid, hitting their children. But sometimes you get to a point where you just have no other options. I feel like spanking is like it's a tool in the toolkit. It's not the best tool.
Perfect.
It's not. Basically, the way I look at it is when you're dealing with children, you have what's called positive and negative reinforcement and positive and negative punishment. Okay. I don't know if people are familiar with those terms.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Have you ever heard of a model of punishment? And I know it's really not even punishment. It's called natural consequences. And it's something I learned in wilderness camp. Like the whole thing was like, what good does it do to punish a child when they're just going to associate the behavior with something negative happening to them, when you could instead use it as a teaching opportunity and let the consequences of their actions affect them directly? Like your kid goes and throws a temper tantrum and breaks something. Like, what are you going to do? Mid-tantrum, take them down and spank them? No, just let them live without the thing they broke.
All right, listen, we're going to get there, okay? But let him frame his argument, because that's what's important. First off, that he kind of gets where he's coming from out, and then we'll come back and let you take the pieces that he lays out. But let him frame out and finish what his stance is, so that we're all on the same page.
Before you do that, I really do think it's critical that both of you kind of tell us what you mean by spanking, because that can range from anything from just a light tap to a belt to a board to a beat down. It's such a vague term when you say spanking. I need to know, and I think the audience wants to know, what your position is as far as any degree of spanking and what you mean by spanking. So in your presentation, can you kind of give me what you think spanking involves?
I'll go
That's
first.
where I came in with reasonable force.
Hold on, him. Hold on one second. He's the pro in this. Like he's taken the position that it's okay. So let him frame out why it's okay, and then you come in and try to take that apart. But let him frame out why, because he's taking the pro in this.
So what would be
go ahead.
your degree of reasonable force example?
For me, a reasonable force is the amount of force required to gain compliance and no more. So
Okay, that works great for police.
that, yes. And I know to me, it's also a legal argument because I'm against parents being thrown in jail for spanking their kids for the most part, as long as they're not abusing their kids. And that's why I was trying to make the distinction between the two. So personally, I would say spanking with like an open hand. You know, I wouldn't go as far as to throw objects in there like paddles or switches or belts or anything like that. I think that's going a little bit too far. But just more along the lines of a parent who is trying to teach their child a lesson and swats them on the butt. If the child cries, the child cries. I mean, it's nothing that's going to be permanent damage. Whereas I could see like a switch or, you know, something that would cut the skin or something like that, I would be against that.
Okay, now that you've told us what you consider spanking to be, go back to where you were talking about how it's a tool in the toolkit, and kind of frame up for us why that should be a tool, and why other examples of kind of mediation wouldn't work. Why that has to be an option.
Sure. And so where I was going is the concept of positive and negative reinforcement, as well as positive and negative punishment. So punishment is simply to discourage a behavior. Reinforcement is to encourage a behavior. The positive and negative don't actually mean necessarily what we think they do. It's not intuitive, but positive just means you're adding something, and negative means you're removing something. So obviously the ideal method that most people would want to use is positive reinforcement, right? You add something, you give the child something to encourage that a particular behavior that you want them to do, okay? But that's also can be known as bribery, which I think that has problems if that is the only method that you use. Okay, negative reinforcement, again, you're trying to encourage behavior, but you take something away. Spanking would fall under positive punishment. So you're trying to stop a behavior or discourage a behavior, and you're adding pain to do so. And then negative punishment would be you're trying to discourage a behavior, so you take something away. So that would be like, you know, your child sneaks out of the house and you take away their cell phone, something along that lines. I think in order to teach a child life lessons, that you need basically each one of these 4 parts. And I think spanking is a one tool that you can use that's part of a toolkit. It shouldn't be the only tool that you use or the most likely tool that you use, but it's an acceptable tool, in my opinion.
Okay, and before we get to you, let me ask you guys this question real quick, just because I'm curious. Were either of you spanked or not spanked? Like, how are you come into this?
I was spanked as a child.
Okay.
I can probably count on one hand the number of times I was spanked. It wasn't very often, but I am coming in it and from the perspective of, I feel like it was character building for me to be spanked.
Okay.
I don't know about him analysis. I'll let him talk.
I was spanked more times than I could possibly ever recall with various different instruments, hands, and hickory switches, of which I had to harvest my own, while crying like a baby because I knew it was about to happen. And if I got a real wimpy switch, I got whipped with it and got sent back out to grab a competent one.
Been there.
but I don't consider it abuse. Like, with the way I would frame my life and my standards, the way I was treated was not abuse, because I know the intentions behind it weren't like "fuck you." They were like, "Okay, you little shit, you need to behave," and I don't have the coping skills necessary to talk to you about this, so I'm just gonna, whip you with things. I have a lot more to add than that, but I don't want to monopolize the conversation on just my past.
I think that could be construed as abuse. Actually, I think that somebody could make an argument for that.
That would be, I would categorize it. If you're going to do it, it's going to be involuntary or non-voluntary, not involuntary, because I know they didn't mean it as like malicious. They just didn't know any better.
I don't think intent matters when it comes to abuse.
Ignorance.
I think in this case, I mean, it's an interesting question, one that I think we should eventually get to. But I think I'm gonna have to go with him on this one. That they probably were just brought up that way. It's just a cycle of psychology and those kind of sorts weren't as in the forefront as they are now. So this is just what their parents did and what their parents did. And I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm against it. I'm on the side that is against it, but I don't think that most parents have abuse in mind. But that's an interesting question. That's a very interesting question. Okay, so I'm gonna let you take your case from what Agnatheus just said.
Okay, I've got a couple of points I was noting. So, okay, I'm at a disadvantage here because I don't plan on having kids ever. I've never had siblings, so I wouldn't even know how to like proxy raise kids or deal with little kids ever. So I'm speaking from a position of ignorance here. So ignorance and idealism. So my ideal way to do, I guess you would call positive and negative reinforcement, would be through natural consequences. As I said earlier, like if you break something, you're going to go without it for a set period, or if you like mess up in a social situation, we're going to focus the punishment on what those impacts are. You know what I mean? But like, you try to avoid actual punishment as much as possible and try to tie in real world lessons with the actions that they did. Now, in the moment when they're all acting crazy and stuff, I don't know how to stop them. Like, I'll admit my fault there. The next thing I was going to say is spanking is a really black and white behavior. It's either happening or not. It's a binary. Doesn't matter what level it is. You can't go, well, he's half spanking someone. It's like is or isn't. And children are so variable that you can't, there's not a black and white answer for fucking anything that any kid does. We're all humans. They're just little adults with a little less capability than us. And, as they grow, they're going to associate you with pain and fear even a little bit. And I think that's kind of messed up from a parental perspective, which goes to my next point, which is kids are often, little and adults are not. So we're like giants to them. Do you remember how big your elementary school felt to you physically? Like, imagine that perspective, looking up at an adult and then they're going to hit you. Like, that's really fucked up. And I guess that's an emotional argument, not really a good logical one. And then I would say that my drawing the line for reasonable force, if I'm going to use reasonable force, would be restraint only. And let's see. I don't know what I would replace the tool of spanking with if I was to figure parenting tools as a tool belt, as you did earlier. I'm kind of ignorant there. So here's my tray of emotional arguments. Please dissect them.
Well, wait a minute. Do you think that one smack, and not even a hard one, do you think that's spanking? And just like a light tap? Because you said there's either spanking or not spanking. But spanking to me is an action.
I think hitting kids is an off and on thing. Like, you're either doing it or you're not. But you're one type of parenting.
Whack, is that spanking? What is spanking?
There's a gradient, of course. But I'm not going to say that all spanking is one to be spanking.
Okay, but is one tap, is that spanking to you?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Not because it's equivalent to a higher.
I'm not disagreeing. I'm
clarifying
your position. Okay.
Like, I categorize it as not happening or happening, and then further divisions of happening, if that makes sense.
Okay. Sure. Yep.
Like, if you establish that dynamic with your kid, it's a tough road to go down. Like, it's not something I would if I could go back and alter my childhood, that's one aspect I would remove. And in foster care, they specifically forbid you from ever even like tapping your kids. You can't do it. Like, you will lose your foster kids immediately. You can starve them, because I've been starved in a foster home, but you can't hit them.
Yeah, no, I support that in a foster home. Yeah.
Yeah, because they're not the real parents. They're not going to have that rapport with the kid. There's millions of reasons why it wouldn't work. And I think it's funny that the same people that be like, yeah, you shouldn't spank foster kids will turn around and say, well, yeah, you can spank your own kids because I fucking own my kids. That's another thing I can't stand. If you're a parent, you don't own your fucking children. They're not chattel slaves. They have minds of their own. You're there to guide them and provide
you do have
a
more
nurturing
control
home for them.
over their upbringing. When you're a biological parent, you do have more rights.
Like 100% responsible for them.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think he means that they're not property. Nobody argues.
No. If you've ever, I can tell you right now, as a parent, your children own you. Trust me
that's
on
the
that
better
one.
way.
Yeah, it's like having a cat. You have the privilege of living with them.
Valid point. Agnes, how do you want to respond to the points that him brought up?
Well, I think the whole, giants was an interesting comment. I think I want to go down that road a little bit. So
Sure.
I believe there should be a power imbalance between parents and kids. Okay, so the fact that we're giants, well, yeah, parents should be giants. There has to be some kind of power imbalance. If there isn't a power imbalance, then the parent is ineffective. If the kid doesn't care what the parent thinks, or has the attitude of, well, you can't do anything to me. If you touch me, I'm going to call the police and get you arrested.
Well, just remember that's not a binary. Just because spanking is absent doesn't mean they don't fear their parents.
Hold on one second, but let's make sure that we let everybody finish out their thoughts so that we don't have any talking over each other. The people out in the audience can't hear when there's that kind of crosstalk going on. It just jumbles everybody's words. So let him finish out the thought, and then we're going to give you all the time that you need to respond to it. But that way everybody stays in their one train of thought, nobody gets lost, and we can kind of guide it from there.
Yeah, so I believe that imbalance in power leads to a healthy amount of fear. The way I equate it to, I remember when I was a little kid and I didn't know what a mousetrap was. And I happened to see one between the stove and the wall at my dad's house. And I reached down and touched it, and it snapped my fingers, right? I still remember that to this day. I feel like today I have a very healthy fear of mousetraps. It doesn't stop me from setting a mousetrap or anything, right? It just keeps me vigilant if I'm ever using one to, hey, these things can hurt. So as far as relating that back to spanking, if we have a parent that's trying to teach their child a lesson, I feel like humans, as a general concept, and actually anything that has a central nervous system, is kind of hardwired for pain. We learn from pain. It's basically the entire, well, not the entire function of your nervous system, but it's one of the major functions that keeps you alive is pain receptors, right? It's how a kid knows not to touch a hot stove twice, right? He'll do it once, but he won't do it twice. So I feel like spanking, you're connecting with a deep part of almost, I can't even think of the word. It's almost back to your roots, your primitive ancestors of, okay, pain means we don't do something, basically.
Instinct.
That's a good, correct. It's connecting with an instinct.
Does it have to be pain though? I mean, a lot of times spanking is connected just with a psychological thing. I mean, for hypnosis, I'm sure the psychological thing was him having to go out and get that switch. That was psychologically fear for him. I mean, Was it not?
I need to add something.
Sure.
Go ahead.
To add to that, that wasn't always how it was handled. It was just the most prominent way that it was handled because it's what I remember
Sure.
most.
But even still, the thought of getting is just as effective sometimes as a pain for as you say.
No, see, the pain is not what I protest. I don't give a flying fuck about the pain because kids hurt themselves worse than parents spank them when they're out playing.
I've been spanked, and it wasn't ever about the pain.
Yeah, it's always about the, oh my God, stop, no, God, please help. Why? What the fuck are you doing? Ow. Like, and then you're scared of your parents.
Shit, what I do now. I only got spanked
you don't
a few
drink,
times,
do you?
but it was always psychological more than anything else to me.
You don't drink, do you, Him?
Not really, no, why?
Good. Just don't start.
Start.
Just don't start. You seem like you get angrier.
Believe me, I am so aware of how dangerous it is. No.
What, drinking?
Okay.
Yeah, too many good people have gone down that road.
I'm not the only one that doesn't get violent when I drink. I'm so mellow when I drink. Everybody else is like,
I just get sad when I drink.
Like, oh no, that's normal stage.
Yeah, definitely don't drink. That's
yeah, you don't want to drink if you're depressed all the time.
Yeah,
it makes me have existential crises.
Yeah, so let's stay. Okay, good. Let's stay away from. We're getting off topic. Okay, so
my bad.
My question. That's okay. It happens every show. Me and Steve go off on tangents all the time. No big deal. Agnatheist. As the toolbox that you brought up just a second ago, my question would be: can you think of any other? Let's say that the spankings weren't on the table, that you couldn't put that in the toolbox. That was not going in the toolbox. Can you think of something else that could work in its stead that might be equally as effective as spanking?
And that's a really tough question because it really depends on the situation. Obviously, children aren't robots, right? I mean,
right.
You could approach it from many different angles and get the same outcome. It's just what tools does the parent have available to them at that time? If a kid is reaching up for a stove or something and the parent slaps their hand, right? I mean, they're hitting the child, but it's an instinctual reaction for the parent first.
I think in that case, that might be a little bit more reactive. Like
sure.
You're not
I agree.
planning on spanking the child. It's just you don't want them to get burned, so you pop them away. So I wouldn't count that. I'm talking about like if let's say the kid.
I think a lot of spanking though is reactive, isn't it?
No,
I think
I
it's
don't know.
Oh, I think
from
somebody who
it may be that you mean that the parents get into such a habit that when they see what they conceive as misbehavior, they just start swinging. And that's a whole other problem. But like I'm talking about in the reactive sense, like if you see a kid coming up to the stove, you're not thinking, well, he's doing something wrong, I need to discipline him. You just don't want him to get burnt. So you stop the...
I mean, smacking kid's hand is far less damaging than what he's going to have happen if he actually puts his hand on that stove. Right. So it's a lesser of two evil things. And I think that's instinctual. I would, as a parent, not hesitate to do something like that. Yeah.
Like if they're about to hurt themselves, that's different. Like stop their hand. I was just adding to what you said.
Let's say the kid's playing ball inside, and he's been told countless times not to play in the house, and he breaks a vase. Let's pretend that we're in that situation now, and that spanking is absolutely not allowed. How would you approach that, Agnatheus, from a parent standpoint? If you could not, under any circumstances, spank the kid, what would be your next go-to move?
Well, I'm sure like a parent would be, either grounding them or, taking away their cell phone or.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so let's go there. That's a good point.
There's other things. Why are they going to be effective? That's the question.
That is a good question. But my my ultimate point is, if you honestly don't, let me ask you this: when you were spanked growing up, did that genuinely stop you from doing something that you wanted to do as a kid? Like, I know me growing up, I got spanked all the time. I, like him, had to go out several times at my grandmother's house and cut a switch down, and I've been down that road. And I can't think of a time when I was going to do something mischievous that the spankings ever came into mind. You know, you get that afterwards when you found out that you've been caught. But going into whatever action you're doing, I can't remember a time that popped in my head. So was that really effective? Now, if you take away my Game Boy growing up, that's going to hurt. Like, hurt. So I remember all the times my Game Boy got taken away. You kind of follow where I'm going?
Well, what do you think about the people that think that's abuse, though? I mean, I've actually seen people have argued that, you take away somebody's cell phone, it's psychological damaging to their kid because that's their social connections, and you're taking away all their stuff. And it's like, are you kidding me? And I got to tell you, kids and cell phones, that is kind of like how it was for you and, you know, your Game Boy, or in my day, Abacus. You know, an Abacus, you had to go out for mathematical stuff. But
there's no difference between that and the girl that or the lady on the news that was talking about getting a baby's consent to change his diaper.
Yeah, I mean, it's bizarre, right? I mean, bizarre. It goes to such an extreme, and those are the fringe where I'm like, at that point, I think you've taken yourself out of the argument to say that, okay, taking away a cell phone is now abuse. No way would I ever think that's a rational argument.
The Game Boys
and
the phones and all that. That's sure. Hold on 1 second. That's a privilege.
Yes,
you know, that is not an aspect of existing, and you're not going to have any type of long-term lasting psychological damage like I think that you would with developing a fear of your parents when the spankings get too far along. Like, there's a big difference between them taking your shoulder, and if people really make that argument, then they're just stupid, and we just have to deal with stupid people in the world. So that's just the way they go.
Well,
go
you
ahead.
have people advocating you have to have a toddler give it permission to change a nappy. It's like, come on.
Welcome to the new world. All right, him.
All right, back to you guys.
I was going to say, and this isn't my main point. I just wanted to add to what you were saying. When I was younger, I was very sure of myself, and I thought there was an objective morality, and I thought, well, there is at least a very basic set of things that every single person agrees upon. There ain't a goddamn thing in this world that everyone agrees upon, even the most basic shit. And I can debunk anybody saying that there is by 2 words: suicidal people, because they don't agree that the things needed to live are good.
You do realize you have objective
it's
morality.
just crazy the more you learn. You know what I mean?
But you do agree you can have objective morality and people not agree that is objective, right? I mean, they don't have to agree that what is moral or immoral to have objective morality. It has nothing to do with that. So if anybody says, this is moral, this is not, that doesn't matter if objective morality exists or not. It can still exist.
Don't get him started.
I was a Christian. I thought that everybody was at least a baseline, like, decent person, and then they started from there, but that's not even the case.
No.
Like, what I'm getting at is that, like, the older I get, the more amazed I get at how far deviating from that center most people are, like how not normal the average person is. You know what I mean? It's insane.
That's a very good point. I didn't know it until I started doing YouTube, but YouTube lets you see.
I tried to tell him this is going to corrupt him. I told him straight out, year or whatever. Oh man, once you start going down this rabbit hole, they ain't no going back, man. You look in that darkness, it starts looking back at your soul.
It's just, it's
true.
Preach
I
it.
tell you, the
Amen,
those
brother.
people.
Hallelujah.
If we're gonna have spankings for anybody, it needs to be for several people on YouTube. Let's instate that first.
Yes. I'm not against spanking adults when they need it. Yes, I'm not against that, and I don't mean like the kind you pay for either.
No, the kind you pay dearly for.
Back to your question. Can I answer your other one?
Yes.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
So
go ahead.
You would ask me, basically, did spanking ever, change my behavior or anything like that?
Mm-hmm.
I can say yes, it did. I remember probably when I was 6 years old, getting spanked for uh, lying to my parents, and to this day, I have trouble lying to anybody, really. I mean, it's something, it's a skill that I really don't have, and I'm really bad at it. So I look back on it and I think it was character building for me, because I didn't have to get spanked. If I was misbehaving, all I needed was a threat to be spanked, and that did it.
Right. Right.
Because you had to, like, just from what I'm hearing, your parents raised you correctly. They did what they knew best, and you came out pretty good. I barely know you,
Yep.
but it sounds like you applied the lessons correctly. And of course that exists. I'm not going to sit here and say, well, I'm so against spanking that I think every parent that does it should be locked up. Of course not. That's retarded as fuck. I just wanted to give you kudos there. Like, I'm not going to sit here and just like advocate my position so fiercely that I would, not take any of your points into consideration. I'm sorry to ramble.
And I think that's a good point,
Real quick.
because I don't think that anybody here is saying that if you spank your kids, you should be locked up. But, like, I don't want it to dive into that kind of, like, should we punish the parents for that? My question ultimately for this is there a better way? It is spanking the best we can do for our kids. I don't want it to focus on the what should be happening to the parents or their motives, because honestly, I don't think that at the core it has anything to do with abuse. It's just it's a quick, effective way to stop a behavior that you find not conducive to your daily routine. It's a quick
I think
solve.
you just
And
hit the
my
nail
ultimate question is,
quick and effective. I think
What's
that's absolutely true.
and my question is, do those quick little fixes over time to some kids affect them adversely as a whole and negatively impact their the rest of their life? So can we from the start just find a better way to prevent that from happening? Because like Kim said, there you do have instances where people like you come out, and me, I think I'm a little strange, but I think I came out pretty normal. But there are cases where that doesn't happen. There are cases where situations get bad and kids don't react very well. And if there was some kind of firewall in place to where that was, I don't even want to say like a last resort, but like not considerable, would that child's life have a more fulfilled pathway?
See, I think it depends on the child, though. I mean, I really hate to
I
say,
think
but
yeah.
I don't think this issue is black and white. I don't think it's dichotomous as people want to make it out to be. I mean, there's so many different factors and the degrees of spanking, the type of learning behavior that a child has. I don't think that it makes sense to say across the board you should never do it under all circumstances or anything like that. I think there are instances. I only had to raise my hand to my daughter maybe 3 times, and it wasn't like anything. There's no pain involved. It was merely just psychological. I mean, it was just nothing more than a tap, but it got her attention.
But you
right?
remember how many it was?
Yeah, I do, because that's how limited it was, right? I mean, it was literally I could count
It
it on
seems
my
like
hand.
all
It
three
could've
of
been
you
more than
have
3 or
that in
4,
common, and I don't.
you know.
But I think it's deeper than that. That's what I'm trying to get at, Steve. Like, I think you remember there are 3 instances where that happened because it's such an unnatural
Right.
thing. It goes against, like, that's memorable. When you do that, it's not just a oh, this happened and I can forget about it. It leaves kind of an impression with you. And I think that's my ultimate question is there a
I
better
actually
way?
think it hurts the parent more than it hurts the child in a lot of cases.
I'm sure
Well, yeah,
that's
but
that.
it's tough as like my daughter's tough as crap now. I mean, when she was growing up, and I hate to take a divergence here, but I think this is important. She was one of those skittish, really reserved, shy type girls, and she learned to play sports. She learned that she's going to get hurt. She's learned she's going to get injured. She's accepted it. She knows her pain threshold, and she's tough now. She's a tough kid. I mean, she took karate. She made it up to like, I don't know, like green belt or something. I mean, she's tough. Now, that obviously wasn't because that, she was spanked a couple times. And again, it wasn't like, bam, bam. It was just a light tap kind of thing. But I do think there might be to something, like you were saying, a reasonable amount for certain types of compliance for certain children does build some type of character. I don't think you can actually just say in all circumstances that doesn't work. But, it is so dependent on so many different factors. And she kick all your asses. I'll tell you right here now, she will kick your ass.
But I think she built that kind of virtue from the sports thing. Like, when you go into sports, the risk that you're taking when you go in there, and it's an adrenaline type thing. It's different when it's imposed on you. Like she's in those instances welcoming it because she wants to play, and those are just kind of the things that go along with sports. But and I mean, I'm not saying that it does have a horrible psychological impact on kids. My only point for this whole thing was to find out if there's a better way that can be equally as effective but less impactful on their overall mental health.
I think for some kids there is definitely better ways, but for some kids there's not. If you have a kid that absolutely has zero respect for their parents, they don't listen at all. They just sneak out of the house and go off and do whatever. And there's literally nothing the parents can do. The parents just start feeling, they're just completely overwhelmed. They're actually, I think a lot of parents now are actually scared to hit to spank their children because they're afraid they're going to go to jail. Unfortunately, that's a reality now.
I'm glad you said that.
I'm
glad you said that because I want to take it back to your original example. I was thinking about this a little bit, and if you were in prison and you caused a mini riot out on the yard, and you are fighting everybody, trying to slash at people, they are under strict instructions. Like, they can't beat you half to death. They risk losing their job if that's the case. They have to do everything they can to take you in without the least amount of incident. So if a cop is...
You're talking in a jail?
Yeah.
I'm
Oh yeah,
sure
they
have the right
forbidden
to...
to
I was
but they're
there.
still going to do it.
I saw it often. They do everything that is humanly possible not to provoke or injure the inmate. Even if it's a fight, they will wait till they fall and then go pick them up. Basically what I'm saying is you are instructed as a jailer who is over prisoners to treat inmates in a better way than what we're kind of talking about here in terms of the reaction to being able to spank or whatever you want to call correcting your child.
And
Now,
I would disagree with that whole premise.
Can I add something?
You'll have to tell me why, because I was there. I was in prison for a year. I saw it almost every day.
What they're using. I mean,
what?
When you have the police officers or whatever, the jail officers that are they're not necessarily being nice to the inmate out in the yard that trying to stab other people. They're
I know they're
beating them with billy clubs and whatever else they got to do to get them to comply.
What I'm saying is, though, you don't see them rushing after them to strike them in any form. If possible, they're going to take them with as little incident as possible. Now, you would think if it's adrenaline filled and they're trying to do something, they're just going to rush in there and start clubbing everybody. But that's not what happens.
By procedure, you're right. Like by the book, yes, but in practice, I'm sure there are variances from that, to say the least. Some
Absolutely.
William clubs getting applied to some faces.
Absolutely. You have instances where that happens, but for the most part, and like I said, I can tell you because I actually saw, I don't know how many times that happened. And yes, you do have some guys who are just, hell bent on getting there and doing whatever. But for the most part, they try to go without instance. And what we do with inmates when they, mess up or whatever is they essentially put them in timeout. You don't spank them when they mess up on the inside. So why do we do that to little kids? Why don't we take the approach of how we treat adults with like timeout, taking
Oh, I
away
agree with
privilege?
you.
Yeah, and I was never in prison, but I can tell you from the military experience, they're not allowed to lay hands on you like a boot camp, right? You can't, they can't strike you. However, there's a lot of things they could do that's actually a lot worse. When you're being cycled for 4 hours at a time, or you're grappling and they put a little bit more pressure on a hold or something. So there's ways for them to do compliance, but I'll tell you that the fear they'll put into you is nothing. I mean, it should be spanking is nothing, or hitting is nothing to the fear of what they could do. I mean, I'd rather gotten hit half the time in boot camp than the fear that they put into you. I mean, at least we get hit, you get knocked down, you get over, and you're done. But you ever had 4 or 5 hours of intense, grueling cycling where you're doing jumping jacks and cartwheels and all kinds of stuff? I mean, it hurts a long time, and you're sore for several days. So even though they can't physically strike you, there is other ways around that kind of stuff.
My point is, though, in those levels, we establish a standard. Like,
sure,
even though you do have people that go outside of the standard, obviously that happens in everything, we still say even the people who break the laws, we're going to do everything that we can not to lay a hand on them. So why don't we apply that to our own households? Why is that?
I think the biggest differentiation that we're looking at is, does spanking an adult actually do anything? I would argue that if you were to spank an inmate, it's
well,
not
in the right time, sure.
Yeah,
that's actually a good point against you, because then, why do we apply a double standard just because they're smaller humans? It's we have a power dynamic over them because we have authority over them. Okay, you said something about power imbalance earlier. Yes, that needs to exist in a parent-child relationship, but it does naturally because you own the house. You also don't need to add to that, hey, I have a size advantage over you. It creates what I like to call, and by that I mean I didn't come up with this, an adversarial relationship where it's the parent versus the child rather than the parent working with the child, and it's them together against the world. You know what I mean? Then you have to start scheming of how to get out of that punishment and shit.
I'll tell you what I think it is. What it ultimately boils down to for me, because I don't think it's abuse between the parents and the kid. I think what ultimately you have happening is the kid does something that the parent realizes is not okay. So the parent feels that they should take action to correct this so that it doesn't happen again. However, instead of going a route that would be probably more effective, I think, but you have to commit to it a little bit longer, like taking something away or grounding them. Because what comes with that is the days of nagging, like, when can I get this back? When can I get this back? Blah, 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 blah. It's a lot quicker, and it feels their need to reassure them that they took steps to correct this action just to spank them. It's just a real quick
But what happens?
Fix.
What happens when they don't care when you take something away?
But it's also possible for them to not care when you spank them too. There's a lot of people in the chat who've made no mention of that. Like the one person said that by the time I was 8 years old, it was a game to me, and I just pretended to hurt so my parents wouldn't feel bad.
You can find outliers in every situation. Now, nobody's saying that those don't exist. You will have people that don't care that stuff gets taken. And in that, then you probably should read a Dr. Phil book, I would say. He probably has the answer when it gets to that level. But I think as a whole, your average kid's going to care when something they care about is taken away. every kid's got something that they care about deep down. And as a parent, you should know what that is. And I think that that's more effective and that's more memorable than the spanking thing. And it's just a simpler way to fix that without risking any kind of emotional damage.
And I think that's another tool in the toolbox, to be honest with you.
I do think we need to start
I'm
wrapping this
aware.
up. I have to go here in a few.
I'm aware, Agnaticus, that is your stance.
And my stance is I have no idea what I would replace that tool with, but my baseline is to not include that if at all possible. However, I am arguing from a position of ignorance, and that ignorance is also willful because I'm not going to have children. I wish I had a solution. We've all been leading up to a point to what would we replace spanking with? None of us really know because children are gray areas and not black and white, and spanking is a black and white behavior. Now there's a gradient of spanking, but once you cross that line, you're into a different style of parenting.
Yeah, I think only a parent really knows what is going to be best for their child. But I think we all agree that even if you decide to spank your child, every parent has to know the difference between a spanking.
I'm going to disagree with you there. Parents don't by default know what's best for their kid by the act of being a parent.
I think they naturally do know better.
Let everybody finish, guys.
I think that most parents, at least a good parent, I should say, a good parent will know more about their child than any other person. I think it's just a biological thing, and you spend some more time with your child. But I was going to say that I think I want to be able to differentiate between spanking and abuse, and anybody who commits any type of abuse on a child needs to go away from prison forever. I mean, I'm done with them. So I think that's something that we all should agree upon, and that if you see somebody in Walmart or whatever, and it's not just a tap, but you see a kid getting beat.
I knew that was coming. I was waiting on that example to come. The Walmart example.
It happens. It happens.
I know. I saw a lady.
Walmart is Jesus, all kinds of weird shit happens at Walmart. Do you really want to go to Walmart after midnight? I don't anymore. I'm scared shitless.
On one of those leashes, those kid leashes, and she had the other end of the leash looped around and was pulling him back as he was trying to scramble away, beating him with the other end of the leash. Only at Walmart. Only at Walmart. Actually, guys, that's why the non-sex show. This is a true story, unfortunately. The non-sex show Discord, voice chat channel after midnight is called Walmart After Dark, because just like the actual Walmart you will go into and see things you did not know existed after dark, you can also hear those things in our Discord. And so if you can't sleep, please go to Walmart After Dark. Ain't that right, Dave?
Dave? Oh, yeah. Yeah. The things
Can I just throw out one more thought here?
Yeah, sure.
So when you're talking about, okay, what's alternatives? And I think like probably in the mid to late 90s, we really saw this societal shift between, spanking and, the timeouts and basically not spanking. I think the 90s was really a shifting point for that. And then, so now you fast forward to today where the kids that were born, in the late 90s, early 2000s are now becoming adults and they're in high school. I'm wondering if this, taking away that tool and replacing it with the quick approach, how is that affecting the kids that are coming out of school now?
You bring up a good point.
I thought you were going to try to link it to the increase in mass shootings. Is that where you were going?
I thought I was going to go with spanking in school, because I was spanked in school once, paddle one time for fighting. And I was against it. Believe me, I still am against it. I don't think any school should spank a child. Period.
I'm not necessarily linking it to that, but at the same time, I'm asking the question: could it be linked? I don't know.
I don't see.
I think it has more. That would.
It's too tenuous of a connection.
It has
Yeah,
more to
very
do with social
tenuous.
media, I think.
You
And the
know,
impact
I want
that
to add
social
to something
media.
that Agnatheus.
All right,
I wanted to
make
add
quick.
something
I'm going
you
to be
said
jetting out of
earlier.
here in like 5 minutes.
Yeah, Steve's
No, it's
got
cool.
to
I was
run.
gonna agree with you that like that societal shift happened, and I think what mostly did that was because people started being aware of what each other were doing, and they're like, oh, okay, now everybody's kind of watching me. Maybe I'll be a halfway decent person and not use hitting as the primary method of disciplining my children. I don't know. We're like, as society progresses and we become more open and connected, we stop doing more reprehensible things and progress forward. Generally speaking, not 100%.
Flat Earth. Okay, awesome.
I'll give you that. Thick
But yeah,
Earth.
good discussion tonight, guys. I know it was quick, but me and Steve are kind of pulled in several different directions. Now I had a stream beforehand, and Steve's got one coming up, so kind of an express show tonight, but good nonetheless. Tomorrow
Yeah,
we'll
you
be
know
back
what?
at 8
Nothing wrong with a
o'clock.
little quickie, right? Nothing wrong with quickie, is there?
Well, that depends. Quickie and what?
I
Spanking.
well,
never
if you
had
never
a
had a good quickie, I'm okay. Whatever. I've had a few good quickies.
This episode, this should be called the Spanking Quickie episode. No debates. It has to be that.
You know, we're gonna have another
But,
episode about spanking. It's gonna be about adults. Trust me, it's gonna be way different.
It's going to
Yeah,
be huge.
I will be leading that. But tomorrow at 8 o'clock, the most requested guest that we have ever had be requested will be with us as Greater Sapien. Looking forward to that. It is flat out fucked up weekend starting tomorrow. We will be doing Flat Earth Saturday and Flat Earth Sunday. So bring your aluminum foil hats, throw away your science books, forget gravity, and take everything that you hold sacred and flush it down the toilet for the next 48 hours, because it's going to be long and drawn out. But I promise, if we stick together, we can come to it at the end. One united sphere.
Lots of alcohol.
Yeah, it's gonna be a shit show. We apologize in advance. Actually, no.
Yeah,
we don't.
total dumpster fire, but nonetheless.
I'm going to be
We'll see
watching the
tomorrow
fuck
at 8.
out of that.
Apology, not
It's going to
apology.
be great.
Oh,
Thank
it's
you
gonna
guys
be-
for having me on.
Good night, Cleveland.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah,
thank
thanks,
you guys.
guys.
And go to Goddess Iowa's channel. See you over there in about 15 minutes.